Good morning, everybody. This is Laura Peterson, your host of Central Florida Real Estate Radio. I'm from Your Home Sold Guaranteed Realty, and to discuss the sale of your home, you can call or text 407-566-2555. That's 407-566-2555. So I'm going to start out with the stats today, and honestly, when I looked at them, I was a little bit surprised because the number of single-family homes went down last week instead of up. And the reason that I'm surprised about that is because the week, well, I guess I shouldn't be surprised now that I think about it, because it's the week of August 31st to September 6th. And so I was thinking, okay, August 31st, that's the last day of the month, and oh my goodness, we should be higher than lower. But basically, it was Labor Day weekend because Monday was the first when I think back on it. So this was starting on Saturday. So the higher number would have been the week before, which it was. So this makes sense. So there was 345 homes that sold last week. Now we are into September, which is one of the lowest months of the year in regards to houses closing. And I think that the reason for that is that, a lot of people want to get back into homes before school starts, because when school starts, there's always a little bit of a downturn. And it's only because, in my opinion, that people are getting used to the kids being back in school, a new routine, all of that kind of good stuff. And so as a result of that, what happens is that there's a couple of weeks where the number of houses that sell go down. And if you think about it, it was about a month ago or so when everybody went back to school. And so as a result of that, that's when the houses would have been going under contract that are closing now. So the other time that's a little bit of a downtime is January, which makes sense, obviously, because everybody's busy with the holidays. So when people's routines are disrupted, then they don't go, then we have a little bit of change in the housing market for a week or two. So nothing major, but that's basically what's going on. So anyway, there were 345 homes that were sold last week, and the median price went down to $427, which is still within our range of being normal and everything. And the inventory decreased by 56, which is at 9,080, which is keeping us at a normal market. Now, because of the number of houses that sold this week, we're right over 6 months of inventory, 4 to 6. It's 6.07 overall. But basically, when you look at it, we're still in a normal market. So if you're a buyer, there are a lot of choices that you have out there of just properties that are on the market. And if you're a seller, it might take a little bit longer than it did in the past. 71 days is the average time on the market. And so as a result of that, you have to put your best foot forward as a seller. So a few years ago, when the interest rates were low and we had a quarter of a month or a third of a month of inventory, I think is what it was, you could not do anything to your house, and people they just needed a house, so they didn't care. They would take houses that were in ill repair and pay top dollar for them, and they would fly off the shelf, and all of that kind of good stuff. So there, you might think, well, I really didn't need a realtor then. Yeah, you really did, because the bottom line was, in order to get that top dollar and to make sure that your house had the exposure it needed to get the most amount of money that you could, you did need somebody that was professional in figuring it out. Because the houses that we put on the market, we priced them high, and then we even got higher because of the way that we marketed them. So our sellers came out even better than the average person did because of our skill in what we were doing. And so I think that that's what you need to, that's what you need to look at. And in this market, you need someone to help you, because basically your house is just going to be one of many that exist out there. And so you need to know what's going on and how to plan for it and what to do and all that kind of good stuff. So basically, when it comes down to it, like I said, there were 345 of them that sold. 30 of them were under 250. 30 between 250 and 300, 92 between 300 and 400, 68 between 400 and 500, 500 and a million had 97, and over a million had 28. So when you're looking at the months of inventory all the way up to 400,000, we're in the 4-month category. When you get to 400 to 500, it's 6.43. 500 to a million this week was at 7.81 and 7.46 over a million. So those are more buyer's market than they are seller market. So that's just something, again, that you need to be aware of, that when you're in that situation, if your house is worth that amount of money, that's awesome, and you want to sell, you just have to make sure that you've got the right person and doing the right thing in order to make that house sell for the sell it all is the first thing, and then that you're going to be getting, what you absolutely want to get for it. So when we're looking to the list to ask price ratio, we're still at 96.49. Under 250 is at 95.07, always less than that. And then over a million is at 94.37, the two bookends that I always talk about that are lower and than the asking price. But everywhere in between is 98, right around 98 for all of them. So that's interesting, I always find, in regards to looking at that as well. So again, it goes to show you that the Central Florida market is very stable. We're not really going up. We're not really going down. We're just kind of staying very consistent, have been ever since the interest rates have gone up. And so you have to put your best foot forward as a seller to make sure that you're getting absolutely what you want to, and as a buyer you have to make sure that that you're looking at what you want to look at and that you're getting the kind of deal that you want to. So when we're working with buyers, a lot of times you might think, oh, there's enough choices and everything out there that you're going to find what you want. Surprisingly enough, there are buyers that still don't find what they're looking for. I have a buyer right now that's looking for a specific neighborhood, and basically there's a few houses in that neighborhood that are on the market, but they're not really what they're looking for. And so I've got to go off market is basically what it is. I've got to make that concerted effort to definitely find them the house that they want and all of that. And there are people that are kind of hanging back going, gosh, I would like to sell, but they haven't put it on the market. I've got one seller right now that's like, yeah, I would love to sell, but I don't want to put it on the market because I think it's just going to sit there. And at the price that they want, it possibly would, and he doesn't want that days on the market to look negative. And so basically it's available if somebody would say, hey, I want to buy your house. But basically the bottom line is that it is not officially on the market. So you've got to, double check all of those things. So when we're coming to condos, townhomes, and villas now, the condos were at 91 versus 95 the week before, not a big change. And there were 272,000 was the median price for condos, townhomes, and villas. And that inventory decreased by 112 units to give us 4,360 on the market. So when we're looking at that, though, those months on inventory there is 11.06 based on the number of houses that sold this week. So quite a difference from the 6 months that there are for the single family homes. So basically when you're in that game of selling a condo, you really, really, really need to look at it and be very conscious in regards to what you're doing, unless you want to just sit on the market. So of the 91 sales, 33 of them were under 250, 24 between 250 and 300, 20 between 300 and 400, 5 between 400 and 500, 8 between 500 and a million, and over a million there was one that sold. So when you're looking at that, you're going, wow, that doesn't sound like a whole lot of houses selling for the week, or condos or townhouses, and it really isn't. So when you're looking under 250, there's 12 months of inventory. Remember I said between 4 and 6 is a normal market. Between 250 and 300, it's at 6.05, so not bad for this week. Then we go to the 300 to 400 is 12.81. 400 to 500 this week is 24 months. 0.74, so almost 25 months of inventory over 2 years. And 500 to a million is at 9, and then 4 over a million, which again, we're only looking at 1 week's worth of data. And so as a result of that, we really have to look at the trends, which is what I always do and everything. But the condo market is definitely higher. It's 92 days on the market on average. But surprisingly, 96.03 of asking price is what it comes in. Again, the bookends of 93.07 under 250. The one over a million did go for 100% of asking price, so they got that on that. But all the others are at like 96.59, 96.78. So they're in the 96s as opposed to the single family homes are at the 98s. So I think that this really shows you that the market is very local. I mean, we're talking about the counties here that are Orange, Osceola, Seminole, and Lake are the ones that we're talking about that are included in these statistics. And then we're breaking it down between single family homes and condos and townhouses. And if you're looking at a specific neighborhood, it becomes much more granular, a zip code, maybe it's a school district. Every area is different. And so the biggest thing that I think that people run into is that they think, it's like my house is different and all of that kind of good stuff. And it is, but basically the bottom line is that if somebody's coming in and getting a loan, they're going to have to contend with an appraisal for the most part. And so, if somebody can buy your house and they have to bring an extra, say, $50,000 to the table because you want more money for it, or the next house right next to it, they can get for, they don't have to bring that $50,000 to the table. Guess what? They're probably not even going to look at your house to know that it's better. And that's what we find a lot of times in this market. So it's really, really interesting, in my opinion, to look at. It takes an art and a skill in order to do that. And so we're here to help you when the time is right. So in order to get in touch with us, you can call or text 407-566-2555. You can find us online at centralfloridarealestateradio.com, and we'll see you after the break. Welcome back, everybody. This is Laura Peterson, your host of Central Florida Real Estate Radio. I'm from Your Home Sold Guaranteed Realty, and to discuss the sale of your home, you can call 407-566-2555. That's 407-566-2555. And you can text us as well. So that's 407-566-2555. So basically, one of the things that I was looking at today, that there was an article that came out that said smart ways to cut home buying costs. Buying a home costs more than a down payment, and experts suggest comparing lenders, exploring FHA, VA, or USDA loans, and programs, aid programs, and seller concessions. So basically, a few years ago, like I was talking about, when the market was extremely hot, there was no inventory and everything. Basically, the bottom line is that when you purchased a home, there were no seller concessions in the market at all. The sellers were getting top dollar. They didn't have to reduce anything. There were already concerns in regards to the house appraising, because appraisers are always operating in the arrears. They're working on basically what's out there in regards to history in what's going on in that neighborhood. So if a property is under contract and maybe it's $10,000 more than what the one that closed last week is, they don't know that. They can't use that or anything like that. So they're always behind. And when a market's falling, they're kind of looking at it ahead and they're like going, oh, it looks like it's falling. So they kind of do compensate for that. But basically, it's all of their standards that are set up for an appraisal that come into play. And that's why it works that way. And so I honestly don't see it as a problem. I see it as as a way to that it's really the bank ensuring that the amount of money that they're giving you, that they're not going to lose money on it should you default. That's basically what an appraisal is. It's not necessarily for the home buyer, it's for the bank. And I think that a lot of people need to keep that in mind. And I've had plenty of arguments with different real estate agents that told me, hey, that is the price, and if it doesn't appraise, then that should be the price of the home. And I said, no, not necessarily. If there's somebody out there that's willing to pay more than the appraised value because they think that person made a mistake, then basically that's what it comes down to. And so as a seller, you definitely need to be aware of that. And, and this particular guy, that was having this argument with me, he told me that his buyers should get this particular house. And I told him, I said, sir, I have offers that are cash that are $30,000 higher than what your buyer's offer is. So why would I take that? I have financing offers that are $30,000 higher than what your offer is, and they say that they're willing to bring money to the table. So basically, when it comes down to it, why would that seller ever take $30,000 less, to work with that person? And so basically what the bottom line is that their buyer did not get that house. Somebody who did pay an additional $30,000 did. They liked the house. They loved the house. Basically, the seller was happy because they got that extra $30,000. And, it was a business transaction. It wasn't an emotional thing. Now, because it was a cash deal, we never had to go through the appraisal process to see if it was going to, appraise lower or whatever. But in that point in time, it probably would. Now, today, that house would appraise at the same value that it sold for because the market hasn't gone down. But they haven't had a huge gain on it or anything, unless I don't remember exactly when they bought it. If they bought it at the beginning of when things were going up, then they would still, be able to take advantage of when things were increasing and everything. But I think that that's one thing that whether you're a buyer or a seller, you're a lot of times people are just looking at that top line number. They're going, okay, this is what I'm going to end up with in my pocket. And the thing that you have to understand as a buyer or a seller, those aren't your only expenses. So when I'm meeting with a seller, one of the most important things that I think that I do is that I go through what I call a net sheet. And that's a business term that really is there for the industry, but it is what it says it is. That is, it tells you what your net is going to be after all expenses. How much money is going to go in your pocket is basically what it is. And that's really what you want to know, correct? When all is said and done with your transaction, how much money is going to go in your pocket? Basically, if no money's going to go in your pocket and you're okay with that, then that's fine. If money's going to come out of your pocket and, you're okay with that, then that's fine. But you definitely want to know that as you're entering into the transaction or even entering into the idea of potentially selling your house. And so that's the point of this, is that you really need to look at the whole big picture, whether you're a buyer or whether you're a seller. Now, with a seller, it's much easier for me to do a net sheet than it is for a buyer, unless you're paying cash, because there are a lot of lender fees and that kind of thing that are included as well. And for example, with a lender, you do collect the insurance and all of that kind of stuff for the first year at the closing, which you do on pretty much every house. But then in addition to that, there's escrow accounts for your taxes and insurance, and the lenders figure out how much that is. So when you're using a lender to purchase a home, we have you look at the loan estimate. Now, the thing is that it probably makes sense to kind of shop it when you're looking at it. Sometimes you might be working with someone that you have confidence in, and they're going to shop it with 15 or 20 people right off the bat, and that might be a good thing for you. And then the next thing that's going to happen is that basically once you do that, then you can decide, what's the best situation for you. But when you're going through that loan process and they're giving you that loan estimate, they're actually going through and making sure that you've got the funds to close and that you've got that money that you need to make it all happen. Because the worst thing to do, obviously, would be that you go through the whole process and then they're like, oh, hey, by the way, you need an extra $4,000 that you weren't allocating for in the future, that you didn't know that you needed. And so we want to make sure that you know upfront what everything is, what it's going to cost, what it's going to be for you, whether you're a buyer or a seller. What you have to know exactly how much money you're going to need, if that's what you wanted to do, and make everything work. Now, a lot of times, one thing that I do is that when I'm working with somebody that's going to sell their house and buy something else, we may not be looking at just one transaction at a time. We're looking at both. So maybe you're going to lose money on the house that you're in, but you're going to really end up on a positive side on the house that you're buying because you get such a great deal on it. And so, when you're looking, you have to look at the whole picture together, in my opinion, to get the best deal for you and your family and everything that you do. So in order to get in touch with us, you can call or text 407-566-2555. You can find us online at centralfloridarealestateradio.com, and we'll see you after the break. Welcome back, everybody. I'm Laura Peterson, your host of Central Florida Real Estate Radio. I'm from Your Home Sold Guaranteed Realty, and to discuss the sale of your home, you can call or text 407-566-2555. Again, that's 407-566-2555. So if you're a seller, and I've been talking about that, how your house stands out, and probably one of the best things that you can do is freshly paint the inside of your house. And basically, when you're doing that, 3 out of 4 people say that repainting the interior can add the most value before a sale, and neutral tones remain the top choice. And color choice does matter when you're going to do this, because basically when you've got an accent wall and it really goes and everything ties with your whole home and how everything goes. When that house is empty is how people are kind of looking at it. And so basically when they're looking at it, they might go, oh my gosh, that looks great with their stuff, but it's not going to look good with my stuff. And that's a thing that you definitely want to avoid. And you have to know that red, if you've got a red wall, it has subliminal messages, and it says stop. It means caution. It subconsciously drives your blood pressure up, and it's great for a restaurant, but not for a house. A house should feel calm and inviting. And other bold colors like orange, neon hues, purples, and saturated pinks are also ranked as homebuyer turnoffs, and all of that kind of good stuff. So neutrals still dominate the real estate industry. 84% of agents say that whites, grays, and beiges remain top choices. And basically the emerging favorite that bridges both cool and warm tones is Sherwin-Williams Worldly Gray, which is a mix of beige and gray. So it's kind of a mix there. But beige and soft green tied as the favorite staging palette, and white and gray tied as the favorite as one of them as well. Navy and white, which offers a contrast without turning off mainstream buyers, and bold combos such as black and gold or taupe and teal, but used sparingly and are reserved usually for luxury listings. So basically, when it comes down to it, when you're looking at it, and I have some friends that they painted their ceilings black, and when you think about it, you go, really? You're going to paint your ceiling black? And they had navy blue walls in this dining room, and then they painted the ceiling black. Absolutely beautiful. But it's not something that you would think of, and when you see it, you go, gosh, that really looks nice. But you have to imagine yourself in there as well. And I remember years ago, there was a house that I was selling, and it did have a red wall. And I told him, I said, I think that the best thing for us to do is to paint that red wall a more neutral color. And they disagreed. And so it did take an awful long time to sell that house. And it was that red wall that was causing the problem. And long time for me, which is not necessarily a long time for other people. But basically, when it comes down to it, you've got to put your best face forward when you're going to do it. And I remember talking to a seller at one point, and he told me that when he was up north, that somebody had told him, they said, before you put your house on the market, you should paint your door yellow, your front door yellow. And he was like, really? Why would I ever do that? Now, obviously, he wasn't in a homeowners association because you'd never probably get away with that bright yellow door. And he said that they did it. It was somewhere in Pennsylvania or whatever. And he said that it worked because what people did is they associated that house with the bright yellow door. So they could always remember that house, and it wasn't something so off-putting because all you had to do was paint the front door. And they even said they would repaint the front door for the person if they wanted them to. But basically, it made the house stand out. And it was a fresh paint job, so it didn't look bad. But basically, when it comes down to it, I'm not sure I would advise you to do that. And in most of Central Florida, in the homeowners associations, you're not going to be able to. But the bottom line is that what you do want to do is you do want to put your best foot forward. And so a fresh coat of paint really makes all the difference, and especially in a vacant house, because what happens is that when you're living in it, you might have stuff on the walls, you've got furniture in there, and everything is kind of looks the way that it looks and all of that kind of good stuff. And you don't see any scuffles on the walls or anything like that. But then what happens is that once you move out, you can definitely see, oh, that's where a nail hole was, or there's, some black marks and the Mr. Clean eraser didn't take it off or whatever. And so you have to be extremely careful on that. And the other thing that I found that a lot of people do when they move out is they try to fill in those nail holes, and they put something over the top of it, and you can tell that there was a nail hole there. It probably would have been better if they would have just left the nail holes. And depending on the buyer, a lot of them look at that and they go, oh my gosh, I'm going to have to paint this whole place. And so what does that mean to them? It means dollar signs. It means a price reduction for you as the homeowner and all of that kind of stuff. And in this market, when there are a lot more choices, they might even say, I'm not even going to bother with this house. And so you definitely want to absolutely put your best foot forward in that vein in doing that. And I think it just only makes sense. So when I'm working with a seller, we definitely go through, I have a list of 27 things that you can do to actually make your house, it's actually a report, sell faster and for top dollar. And if anybody wants that report, just reach out to me, 407-566-2555, and I'll definitely get it to you. But that basically goes through a lot of the things that make a difference. For example, clutter. And I tell people all the time, I haven't talked about it for a long time, but I've been doing this show for a long time, so I know I've talked about it a lot. But basically, if you just took your phone and you took a picture of a room in your house and you looked at it, you would go, oh my gosh, I don't see that when you're there. It's like, you don't recognize you're kind of, they have that commercial nose blind that you don't smell what's going on, which if you're in your home, you don't recognize that. And the other thing that you don't recognize is definitely the clutter. But the clutter is another thing that definitely having your counters clear and all of that kind of good stuff makes a huge difference to where people think that, oh my gosh, we've got plenty of room here versus, oh my gosh, there's no room to do anything. I'm not going to have room to lay out my stuff, to do my cooking, to leave my keys or anything like that. So basically being more conscious in regards to what you should do versus not do, that's a really good hint right there. If you're looking at anything and you take a picture of it, you're looking at your office and you take a picture and you're going, Oh my gosh, there's a lot more clutter than I recognize or realize for most people. Now, there are those people that do not have any clutter, and that's awesome, but a lot of people have more clutter than they think they do. And just looking at a picture is going to tell you more than what you need to know. So in order to get in touch with us, you can call or text 407-566-2555. You can find us online at centralfloridarealestateradio.com, and we'll see you after the break. Welcome back, everybody. I'm Laura Peterson, your host of Central Florida Real Estate Radio. I'm from Your Home Sold Guaranteed Realty, and to discuss the sale of your home, you can call or text 407-566-2555. That's 407-566-2555. So, I like to talk on the show about things that I think are interesting for you as a listener, but also to me, because I just find this stuff fascinating and everything. And so I, pay attention to it. And obviously it's my job. I work with a lot of people and all of that kind of good stuff. But, like the condo market, like I mentioned earlier in the show, is definitely the type of market right now that is you've got to be so on top of if you're a condo owner. And the prices of the monthly fees, I think, are the biggest driver of why there's so much inventory and why they sit on the market. So, for example, and I have to look this up because I really don't know 100%. I just am going off of what I run into on a daily basis. So it's just kind of a guess more than facts, and I will get the facts. But basically, the bottom line is that I believe that the average condo fee in Central Florida at this point in time, I would say, is in the neighborhood of about $700 a month, if not more. And many of them are over $1,000. And you go, okay, what do I get for that? And what you get is you get building maintenance, and you get, the landscaping for the whole development and everything. You have insurance that's included in that, usually not your content insurance, but the building insurance is included in that. And many times that's kind of about it. It's like your roof is included, but that's building maintenance and all of that kind of good stuff. And it all comes back to where the condo market monthly fees started increasing after the collapse of the Champlain Towers and in the Miami area and Surfside. And that happened in June of 2021. Tragically, there were 98 people killed because the buildings collapsed in the middle of the night, and most people were sleeping. And so they had no warning or didn't know that the building was collapsing or anything by that. Now, that happened in 21, and about a year ago, there was an article that came out that said that they would have more findings in another year, which we've been another year. And so they just came out, and basically it is similar to what they said in that article last year, that they said that the pool deck collapsed first. And so the pool deck actually was kind of holding up the building, if you will. And so what they've done now in condos is they have made sure that, you have to, if the condo is over 3 stories, if it's 4 or more, then you have to have these studies done to make sure that everything is stable and continues to be on a consistent basis. And so this is a 12-story building that collapsed. And like I said, 98 people died in that collapse. And the south pool deck began falling down at least 7 minutes before the tower. So the pool dragged the building down with it, is basically what happened. And so what they found, that most residents were asleep, like I said, because it happened at 1:22 a.m. And that they have approved more than $1 billion settlement for personal injury and wrongful death claims that came as a result of the disaster. And basically that the building was in distress in the weeks before the collapse, which I find interesting. And so among the indicators of deeper seated problems, there was a door that was dislodged from the frame. So nobody paid attention to that. There were cracks in the walls, which where heavy planters were located, and a gate that shifted and became jammed shut. So when those things are going on, they're things that you need to pay attention to because you don't know what the underlying factors are. And the day before the disaster, the water was leaking from the ceiling in the parking garage that had experienced numerous cracks, and the flow dramatically increased the hours before the collapse. So that the construction flaws that led to the collapse were present from the time that the 40-year-old structure was built. The finding of the Champlain Towers investigation will improve building safety, both on new construction and repairs for older structures and all of that kind of stuff. This tragic event has revealed flaws in our systems, and quality is at the heart of it. And so basically, as a result of that, from that point forward in 2022, there was a law in requiring condo associations to have sufficient reserves to cover major repairs. Some residents were caught off guard by hefty fees imposed to cover years of deferred maintenance expenses required to bring the buildings into compliance, and that's why the fees are where they are today. And what's happening on that land today is that a luxury condo building called the Delmore is being constructed on the collapse site, which was purchased at auction for $120 million, and the starting price is $15 million each for the new condos that's expected to be completed by 2029. So that's what's going on basically with that building and everything. So it is totally, very sad and everything in regards to what happened on that. But the good news is that it didn't just happen and everybody said, oh, that's very sad. What has happened is that they have gone in and made sure that it's not going to happen again in the state of Florida, because they are doing these checks to make sure, and these engineering studies that they do are 50,000 or more, probably a year or every few years. I'm not sure how often they have to do them. And so as a result of that, the condo fees are high, but you do know that you're going to be living in a safe building. And, before I moved to Florida, I did live in Chicago, and I lived in a high rise. I was on the 21st floor on Lake Michigan, and it was great. That building was rock solid, and there weren't any challenges with it. They were always on top of it and figuring out what was going on. And so condo living is not bad. That's what I want to make sure that everybody knows, that they have made sure that it's safe and sound and all of that kind of stuff. But as a result of the things that were going on, and I was talking to another lady in Ormond Beach that she moved down here and she had bought a property there, and so and she saw some cracks in the parking structure, and so she got on the board, she got involved, she made sure that they got all of those things that were deferred maintenance taken care of, and there aren't any problems with the building. Now, it was a financial cost to those people, but now that is past, and I'm hopeful that the condo fees will maybe settle down a little bit. It's kind of one of those things that the pendulum has to go too far one way and then it goes too far the other way. So basically when it comes, it's like that's kind of what happens in life, right? That you're right there in the middle and you never stay there. And so maybe you go too far to one way and then you overcorrect and you go too far the other way. And I think that's what's going on with the condo fees today and why they are where they are. But, it's not a bad thing to have a condo. You just have to go into it with your eyes wide open, knowing what's going on, looking at the whole situation and finding the best move for you. And a lot of people like them because it is lower maintenance on your side. You have to take care of the stuff on the inside, but the outside is taken care of for you. So for every person, it's a personal preference in regards to what's going on, what you need, what you want to do, and it just makes sense. So we want to make sure that we're here for you to take care of whatever your needs are in the housing market or in any way that we can help you, obviously, and all of that kind of good stuff. But in order to get in touch with us, you can call or text 407-566-2555. You can find us online at centralfloridarealestateradio.com, and we will see you next week. Have a great one, everybody. Bye-bye.